Hi, my name is Chef Pyet Despain, winner of Next Level Chef and owner of Pyet's Plate Private Chef Service. I specialize in Indigenous Fusion Cuisine. I combine both of my cultural heritages, Native American and Mexican American, and provide beautiful, bold dishes. Today, I'm going to be sharing a very special recipe with you, utilizing some fresh ingredients from the Giving Grove and their orchards. The Giving Grove supports neighborhood volunteers in planting and caring for urban orchards. These orchards not only nourish the community with free and fresh fruit and nuts, but also berries. They also nourish the earth by using holistic growing practices. Each of these orchards are a part of a nationwide network of Giving Grove programs. Together, the network supports over 450 urban orchards, producing 1.2 million pounds of free food per year for communities experiencing low or no access to fresh foods. So the recipe I'm going to be sharing with you is a nettle and pecan pesto with a smoked oyster mushroom and a wild rice. You're going to need some fresh nettle, wild rice, some corn, thyme, poblano peppers, and your oyster mushrooms. So for the first part of this recipe, we're going to make our wild rice. So in the wild rice is charred corn and some roasted poblano peppers. You can use both an open flame gas stove burner, or you can use a cast iron skillet. Just place your peppers around the burner just like that and rotate with the tong every few minutes. And for your corn, if you're using a cast iron skillet, you can just set it in your skillet and just rotate that every few minutes as well. So you'll start to see your pepper blister on the bottom. This is when the aroma of the pepper will really start to make its way. We can see that here, and we can rotate this around just to make sure that you get a full charring on your pepper. So wild rice can have a very earthy flavor. The corn and the sweetness and the charness really adds another flavor component, and a little bit of a spice from the peppers really adds a really deep flavoring in the rice. Peppers and corn have been widely used across the Americas for the indigenous people. A lot of peppers grow in the southern part of the Americas, and corn really originated from the southern part of America as well, and then made its way throughout the entire US. Corn was used as a main survival ingredient for indigenous people. It was utilized in many different ways, whether you were eating it just off the corn on the cob. You can also grind it down into a flour and eat it as a corn mush. And the peppers were obviously used to add some flavor and was widely traded amongst tribes in the Americas. So now that we have some good charring, go ahead and prep these out for our wild rice recipe. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the kernels off of our cob. I'm going to put this flat side of the cob down onto my cutting board and just start at the top and cut down. So for the remainder of this wild rice recipe, we're going to be using some thyme, garlic, sunflower oil, and vegetable broth. Now this beautiful wild rice was often used up north in the northern part of the Americas by the Anishinaabe tribe, and they called it moonin. So for your thyme, if you want to take all the leaves off the sprig, you just simply hold it from the top and pull down. And you want about a tablespoon. I really love the freshness of thyme and the earthy herbiness of it. It adds a really nice depth to the flavor of this wild rice dish. I'm going to do a quick mince on my garlic and just doing a rough chop. It doesn't have to be too perfect. So I have a pot over a medium flame. I'm going to add my sunflower oil to the pot. I'll then add my thyme and my garlic to really infuse those flavors into the oil. And then we'll add our wild rice, allowing it to toast and really gain the flavors of that thyme and garlic. So next we're going to add our vegetable broth. Want to mix it all together, add your pinch of salt, and then add a little lid to it and let it do its thing. So while our wild rice is cooking, it takes about 20 to 35 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and prepare our chiles here, our peppers. For the sake of flavor, I'm going to go ahead and leave the skin on for this recipe. Chop these up as big or small as you'd like. So you need one large pepper. You can add them in the beginning when you're boiling your rice, or you can add them at the end and toss them in your rice. So I like the freshness and the flavors to really pop at the end. So I'll add these closer to the end of the rice being done. Now is the exciting part. We're going to make our nettle and pecan pesto using some fresh ingredients that were harvested from the Giving Grove. So I have here some pecans, olive oil, lemon, garlic, and our fresh greens. So I'm going to be using a molcajete or a mortar and pestle for this. You can use a food processor if you'd like. So you can find these out in foresty areas or woodsy areas, but they're really, really good, full of nutrition. They were used by Native American tribes to help with inflammation in the joints and the muscles, and it has a lot of nutrition. So I'm just removing the leaves from all of these plants here. You can utilize the entirety of the stem if you'd like, but the stems are very fibrous. And the leaves are actually a lot easier to break down in your mortar and pesto. And so for these, the way that we're going to prepare them is boil them down to help get rid of the little stickers. You can just use your hands or your tongs to just kind of squeeze any excess water out. It's okay if you have a little bit of water. You're going to be putting it in your mortar and pestle just like this, along with all of the other ingredients. I'll go ahead and add my garlic, my pecans, some lemon. And the cool thing about lemon is when you cut the cheek of the lemon, which is just the side, it produces about a teaspoon of juice. So you only need about 1 to 2 of these cheeks and you'll have enough. I'm gonna add some olive oil here, just a little at a time, and I'll add more later. I'll add some black pepper, add some salt, and I'm going to go ahead and start breaking down some of these ingredients. When knives didn't exist, or sharp objects, or we didn't have the same tools that we do now to use for cooking. We utilized nature and things found around our environments to really break our food down and cook with. But I really love to utilize these traditional ways just because it reminds me of my roots and my ancestor foods. And it's a lot fun to engage into cooking when you're using these types of tools. Any recipe that takes time and any cooking that takes time to produce and to make always tastes better than doing it the quicker route, because those flavors really develop as you're crushing things down or cooking them or marinating them together. I'm gonna add more of my pecans and a little bit more of my olive oil. And we can taste it and see if we need to add any more salt or pepper or lemon juice. So we're going to go ahead and put this to the side for now, and we will be topping our dish with it later. So now we're almost halfway through of cooking our rice down. So we're going to take a peek at it. It looks like it's moving along pretty nicely. So I'll go ahead and add the remaining ingredients, which are the charred poblano peppers with the skin on, but remember, you can take them off if you'd like, and our charred corn. I'm going to mix these guys up, added just a little pinch of salt here, and we're going to cover it and cook it for the remaining 10 to 15 minutes. So for this part of the recipe, I'm going to be cooking these beautiful oyster mushrooms and adding a nice smoky flavor to them at the end. We have these oyster mushrooms and I'm going to be browning here in this pan. Now I'm utilizing some of the same ingredients that we use in our other part of our recipe, but you can mix them up if you'd like. So I have some fresh thyme here and garlic, and a really fun ingredient here is going to be duck fat. So duck fat was often used in indigenous cooking to add some fat to wild game. Wild game meat is typically pretty dry, so we would utilize the duck fat to add some moisture and some richness to that meat and rehydrate it. You can use a vegan butter, you can use a different type of oil if you'd like. You don't necessarily have to use the duck fat, but the duck fat adds this really rich flavor to our mushrooms. We're going to add some sunflower oil or neutral cooking oil to the bottom of our skillet here. And I'll go ahead and place my mushrooms in the pan. So what I want to do is allow these to really brown and cook on each side for about 2 to 3 minutes. Once they start browning, you can flip them over to the other side. So the purpose of doing a lot of charring and browning in this recipe is with traditional Native American cooking, they had to cook on open flames and oftentimes really hot stones. And so that really allowed them to add some nice charring and flavoring to their food so it wasn't just so bland. So I really like to utilize these methods to bring out that traditional cooking and those traditional flavors within my dishes. We're going to add some white wine to our pan just to add a little bit of flavor. Now once that white wine has fully evaporated from the pan, we're going to add in our thyme, our garlic, and kind of do a toss in our duck fat. So using a decent wine, doesn't have to be too expensive, but something that is good to drink, that's what you want to cook with. So now I'll go ahead and add my thyme. Instead of using garlic, you can add shallot to this. So I have all those nice aromatics in there, and I will then add my duck fat, adding some richness to this. And now I would just do a quick little toss in all these ingredients, adding some nice flavor. And they look so beautiful. They smell so good. And there we have it. Our mushrooms are ready to be smoked. So this is another one of my favorite parts of this recipe, which is smoking the mushroom. You don't necessarily have to smoke it, but I personally love the smokiness added to the flavor of the aromatics that we cooked the mushrooms in, alongside with that pesto. Those flavors together just really hit home for me. So I have some hickory wood chips here. You can use any type of wood chips that you'd like, but I have hickory just to add a nice hickory smoke. And also the hickory tree is a sacred tree to some of the tribes across the nation, like the Cherokee Nation. So what I'm going to do is trap smoke that's coming from the smoke gun into the bowl, and I'm going to quickly put a plate on top just to trap it in there. And I'll do this a few times and toss the mushrooms, just making sure they get a full smoking on all sides. So we're gonna wait a few minutes for that smoke to really clear up in there, and the mushrooms in there really marinating in the smoke, getting that nice flavor. So you can use this method on pretty much anything. I like to smoke beans this way. So if I have a tapari bean or a white northern bean, I like to add a little bit of smokiness to them. You can do meats, marinating meats overnight and then smoking them, and do a few rounds of the smoking just to add that flavor to it. Now, if you don't want to use a smoke gun, you can just use 1/4 of a teaspoon of a liquid smoke. Oh my goodness, it smells so delicious. So our mushrooms are ready for plating. I'll go ahead and grab our wild rice and our pesto, and we will put this dish together. So on the base of this dish, we're going to add our wild rice, and then next we'll add our mushrooms here, and then the pesto. And then there we have it. This is a beautiful dish here. I want to make sure I get a bite of every element of this dish. That mushroom, chef's kiss. You have the freshness of the herbs in there with the mushrooms and the pesto that's made from everything that you can find in nature. So that is my favorite part of this entire dish, is all of this is stuff that's indigenous to the Americas. And you can find a lot of these fresh ingredients at the Giving Growed orchards. I'm gonna eat it now.